At 38, Clara had mastered every kind of patience, except the one that required her to wait for herself. To her students, she was composed. To her friends, dependable. But beneath the calm exterior was a secret that had grown heavier with each birthday. She had never been touched. Not once. Not by choice, not by fate, simply by fear disguised as faith. She believed that saving herself was noble, that waiting would make the first time sacred. But years passed, and the silence between her and her own body widened until it became a country she no longer knew how to visit. Then she met him, a man with kind eyes and the promise of understanding. Their connection felt effortless, like an answer arriving late but right on time. For the first time, she imagined letting someone in, not just into her life, but into the years of quiet she had carried. When she finally confessed, her voice trembled, not from shame, but from hope. He smiled, said he needed space, and then he vanished. The rejection didn't just hurt, it shattered the illusion that purity would protect her. In the hollow that followed, a harder truth surfaced. She had never really been waiting for a man. She had been waiting for permission to belong to her own body. So she began again, slowly, quietly, determined to find out. What does love feel like when it finally starts from within? And that question would change everything. Clara's days unfolded in predictable rhythm. Lesson plans, chalk dust, the hum of fluorescent lights over rows of restless teenagers. She taught literature, words about love, longing, and freedom. And yet, none of those words seemed to apply to her. In her classroom, she was fluent in emotion. In her own life, she was mute. Her colleagues admired her calm, her careful composure. "You have such grace," they'd say, meaning it as praise. But for Clara, grace had become a disguise, a performance of serenity that concealed a lifetime of restraint, calculated not to invite curiosity. The truth was simpler and lonelier. She had spent decades avoiding her own reflection. Her upbringing had been gentle but strict. Her mother spoke of virtue like a shield, her father of discipline like salvation. "Real love waits," they would say. And so, she waited. Through university, through early adulthood, through one hesitant relationship after another. But the longer she waited, the heavier the waiting became, until virtue began to feel like punishment. In her 30s, invitations dwindled. Friends married, divorced, remarried. Conversations turned from dreams to children, from exploration to fatigue. Clara became the friend who listened, who advised, who stayed late to clean up. She learned to fill the silence with usefulness. Yet, at night, the silence returned. It was no longer peaceful, it was accusatory. She would lie awake and feel an ache she couldn't name, a quiet hum beneath her ribs, as though her body were speaking in a language she had forgotten. She would bury it beneath prayer, work, and discipline. But desire, denied too long, doesn't disappear. It goes underground, where it hardens into shame. Sometimes she wondered if she was broken, not physically, but spiritually, unfit for the kind of love that made other people glow. She told herself it didn't matter, that her life had meaning beyond romance. But still, when her students asked about marriage and literature, about connection, touch, devotion, her throat tightened. She could speak of metaphors, but not of memory. She lived alone in a small apartment near the school. The rooms were clean but silent, the kind of silence that swallows laughter before it can start. She had one framed photograph of herself at 20, a younger woman smiling with certainty that time had since eroded. Then came the message. A friend had introduced her to an online group, a quiet community for mature singles looking for genuine connection. She joined hesitantly, her profile modest. Teacher, reader, believer in kindness. His name was Daniel, 50, widowed, with words that felt patient and sincere. Their first exchanges were cautious, the kind of politeness that hides curiosity. But soon, messages turned into conversations, and conversations into hours. For the first time in years, Clara felt seen, not for her restraint, but for her thoughtfulness. Daniel asked questions no one had ever asked before, not about her job or her family, but about what she feared, what she missed, what she dreamed. He never pushed, never rushed. The care in his words began to soften something inside her. Weeks passed, and their connection deepened. They spoke of literature, of loss, of what it means to be alive after disappointment. Slowly, Clara began to imagine a different ending to her own story, one that didn't have to begin in perfection, but in honesty. When he suggested they meet, she hesitated, her heart caught between longing and terror. Yet a quiet voice whispered beneath the fear, "It's time." And for the first time in her life, she allowed herself to hope, not for rescue, but for discovery. She didn't yet know that the moment she dared to tell the truth would also be the moment her old life would shatter. They met on a Saturday afternoon in a quiet cafe 2 train stops from Clara's apartment. Autumn light angled through the window. For days, she had rehearsed how to say it. Each version sounded like apology. When Daniel arrived, linen shirt, careful smile, her script dissolved. Small talk carried them through tea and pastry. Then the silence arrived. "I need to tell you something," she said, hearing the tremor in her voice. I've never been with anyone." She watched his face as people watch rain, braced for a change in weather. It came, a flicker behind his eyes, kindness tightening into caution. He reached for his cup, then set it down. "Thank you for trusting me. That's a lot to hold." The past refusing to stay past. When they stood to leave, he hugged her, almost formally. "Let me think," he murmured. "I don't want to hurt you." For 3 days, his messages slowed, then stopped. Clara did not collapse. She disassembled, piece by piece. At school, she graded essays on restraint. At home, she folded laundry like ritual. Nights were worst. The body keeps 2 clocks, one for time, one for touch. Her second hand had never moved, and now it roared. She tried logic. He is allowed to choose. She tried prayer. Let this sting teach me kindly. But shame is an opportunist. It speaks in the dark. It translated his silence into verdict. Unwanted, unready, unworthy. On the 4th night, she called her cousin Aida, the only person who'd ever asked her, without judgment, if she was happy. "He left," she said. "Or maybe I left myself first." Aida listened, then offered a line that felt like water. "Maybe you didn't fail at love. Maybe you were taught a version that forgot your body." The sentence lodged under Clara's ribs. She realized how often she traded truth for approval, smiling when she meant no, waiting when she meant ask me, mistaking endurance for devotion. She could quote sacred text about purity. She could not quote a sentence about consent with self. The following Sunday, she found a flyer on the library board. Women's Circle, Story, Breath, Belonging. It met in a rented studio above a bakery. 12 chairs, a rug, a kettle humming. The facilitator, Leela, spoke in a voice. "We're not here to fix," she said. "We're here to listen. To ourselves first." Introductions were brief. When Clara said, "I'm 38 and new to my own body," no one laughed. A few nodded. Leela invited them to place one hand on the chest, one on the abdomen. She said, "Notice where the breath meets your palm. Start there." Clara felt almost nothing. Air skimming the collarbones, a careful rise that stopped before it reached her lower hand. Leela said, "If tears come, they're welcome. Tears and pleasure live in the same nervous system. Permission." Warmth gathered at Clara's eyes, then fell. No one rushed to comfort her. The group held its own gravity. In it, Clara realized how starved she was for witness. After the practice, they shared in short sentences. "I hold my breath when I say yes," said one. "I disappear when someone is gentle," said another. Clara spoke last. "I thought waiting would make love sacred, but it made me absent. I want to learn presence." Leela nodded. Presence begins with pacing. The body asks before it gives. Listen for the yes smaller than fear. On the walk home, Clara noticed the city differently. The weight of keys, fatigue in her calves, dusk softening edges. At her door she paused, palm on the wood, and whispered, "Let me be honest before I am brave." She set her phone face down and did not wait for Daniel's name. She drank water. She breathed until her shoulders dropped 1 millimeter. Then she opened her journal and wrote 3 lines. "I was not rejected. He refused a curriculum he doesn't speak. My task is not to persuade. My task is to belong to myself." That night, she slept without bargaining. Morning would ask for lesson plans. Beneath those lists, a new syllabus had begun. Body literacy, consent with self, the grammar of a gentler yes. Clara returned to the women's circle the next week with determination and a quiet resolve that surprised her. Leela began with a question. "Where today do you feel a yes the size of a seed?" The room stilled. Clara placed her hand at her sternum. The breath was faint but honest. She learned that honesty, not intensity, was progress. They practiced pacing. 2 minutes of breath, 30 seconds of rest, 1 sentence aloud. "I am here." At first, the words felt like lines from a play. During the 3rd round, her ribs leaned into her palm. Small, almost invisible. Still, it registered. Homework was gentler than expected. Walk slower. Drink water with attention. Put the phone down, away. Safety recalibrates through repetition, Leela said. Muscles unlearn faster than memory. Safety rewires faster than fear. Clara tried. Some days the practices worked. Others, they irritated her. She wanted revelation, not patience or pacing. At school, she taught Jane Eyre and caught herself praising endurance, then wrote in red in her notebook, "Endurance without consent is exile." Daniel texted once, "Thinking of you." She stared until the words blurred. The body asked the question she recognized. Is contact safe? Her chest tightened. The answer arrived as a kind no. She typed, "I need time," and felt the pride of accuracy. Weeks later, the circle added touch education. Nothing sensual. Ask, offer, decline, renegotiate. They practiced consent scripts. "May I place my hand on your shoulder for 10 seconds? No, thank you. Thank you for telling me." Simple steps, Radical effect. Clara's pulse fluttered even when she said no. Leela smiled. Boundaries don't end connection. They shape it. At home, she built a ritual. Lamp low, kettle humming, journal open. She wrote in fragments, notes for a language learned late. Weight behind breastbone. Shoulders soften when exhale lengthens. Tears mean the nervous system trusts the room. Once these were weakness. Now they were coordinates. Friction returned. A colleague invited her to dinner. Charming, practiced. He reached for her hand. Her breath halted. The reflex to appease flickered. She heard Leela. The body always asks before it gives. Clara withdrew without a story. I moved slowly. He laughed, called her mysterious. She paid her half and walked home relieved and unsure. Relieved she had not abandoned herself, unsure what it might cost. The next circle unraveled her differently. A guest-led sound on the exhale. As the room vibrated, sadness rose like weather. Not dramatic, simply certain. She let it pass through her throat. I think my silence learned to wear a smile, she said. Heads nodded. Mine wore competence, someone's replied. Lila, shame thrives on speed. You're slowing it. Clara booked a pelvic health therapist. The clinic smelled of eucalyptus. The therapist outlined the plan before questions. We move at your pace. You choose the door, and you choose when it closes. Education came first. Diagrams, muscles that guard like sentries. How breath is a hallway that widened rooms. No exam, not yet. Relief arrived without approval. Setbacks came quietly. On a rainy Sunday, she opened old photos and found the cafe with Daniel, the kind's light, the promise she had built alone. Ache returned. She stood at the window until it shifted from verdict to information. You miss being chosen. She placed a hand on her heart. I choose you, she said. It felt corny, and it worked. Warmth replaced ache. Soon the therapist offered an option. Would you like to practice self-directed external touch over clothing with me guiding language from across the room? One word stops everything. Clara agreed. 3 minutes. She named sensations, pressure, temperature, texture. When overwhelm approached, she said pause, and the room obeyed. The pause felt like power, not failure. Spring approached. She noticed jacaranda blossoms in gutters, purple like confetti where no party had been. She took the long way home to feel her legs tire. Tired felt honest. Honest felt safe. Her student, she said she lingered longer over poems. She offered a line she had written for herself. Pleasure isn't performance, it's connection. First to breath, then to another. Not a lecture, a mirror. One evening, she read aloud from her journal. I am not behind, I am in season. The sentence changed the air. Tasks acquired texture, right now. Then an email arrived, a friend from the circle. There's a small retreat next month. Story, breath, boundaries. Her first response was excuse. Her second was fear. Her third was a thin, unmistakable yes. She registered before doubt rearranged the furniture. In the days before the retreat, dreams returned. Doorways, thresholds, a key warm in her palm. She woke with her hand at her heart, not as defense, but greeting. The body had never refused her. It had only requested better terms. The night before she left, she passed the mirror and did not look away. We go slowly. We go kindly. We stop when you say stop. Consent with self, again and again until it became posture. Escalation had done its work, not by intensifying longing, but by deepening capacity. The next chapter would not begin with a man. It would begin with a door she could open from the inside. The retreat took place on the outskirts of town, in a renovated farmhouse surrounded by quiet hills. There was no signal, no schedule beyond sunrise and sunset. Just 20 women, a circle of cushions, and silence that felt alive. Clara arrived early, suitcase light but heart heavy with the weight of expectation. She wasn't sure what she was hoping for. Release, maybe, or proof that all this inner work meant something. Leela greeted her with a smile that said, "No rush." The weekends isn't about fixing, she reminded the group that first evening. It's about remembering what already knows. On the second day, they began the breath work. The instructor guided them with slow precision. Inhale, expand, exhale, release, until the room moved as one organism, a tide of sound and surrender. At first, Clara felt nothing but frustration. Her body, disciplined by decades of control, resisted the rhythm. But somewhere between the 7th and 8th round, the resistance began to melt. Her breath deepened, the edges of her awareness softened, and for the first time, she stopped trying to perform peace. Tears came quietly, not as sadness, but as warmth. The kind that felt like her body's way of saying, "Thank you for noticing me." The instructor's voice drifted through the haze. When breath moves freely, emotion finds its way home. Clara realized she had never given herself permission to feel anything without reason. Everything in her life had been achievement, apology, or analysis. Never this. Simple, unfiltered presence. Her palms tingled, her ribs expanded. A pulse gathered low in her abdomen, not of desire, but of recognition. The sensation frightened her. Old reflexes warned her to pull back, but Leela's earlier words echoed. The body always asks before it gives. Clara whispered yes to herself and stayed. The pulse became warmth. The warmth became release. Not climax, but connection. When the session ended, the room remained silent. Faces shone with tears and breath. Clara sat cross-legged, palms up, stunned not by what she had felt, but by what she hadn't feared. The warmth within her wasn't something foreign invading, it was something returning home. Later, during sharing circle, she struggled for words. It wasn't pleasure, she said slowly, it was peace, like my body finally trusted me to listen. Leela smiled. That's the beginning. Pleasure is simply the body's way of celebrating safety. That night, Clara walked outside. The sky was scattered with stars, unfamiliar and infinite. For years she had prayed to a God who lived above the clouds. Tonight, she sensed divinity differently, quiet, pulsing beneath her skin, not distant, not judging, present. Inside, she wrote in her journal, "Maybe purity isn't about who you let touch you. Maybe it's about how gently you learn to touch yourself, with breath, with kindness, with truth." She realized then that Daniel's rejection had not broken her, it had redirected her. He had been a mirror showing her the doorway she needed to open inward. Every moment of restraint, every unanswered question, every ache had led here, to this breath, this presence, this reconnection. Before sleep, Leela passed her a phrase like a benediction. Healing begins when you stop punishing yourself for being human. Clara lay awake for a long time, watching moonlight move across the ceiling. The old silence still lingered, but it no longer frightened her. It hummed differently. Now, less like absence, more like space. Tomorrow, she would return home, back to the same classroom, the same city, the same routines. But tonight, something irreversible had shifted. For the first time, she wasn't waiting for anyone's permission to feel whole. Her body had answered back, and she had finally learned to listen. Back home, everything looked the same, yet nothing felt the same. The walls of her apartment no longer echoed. The silence that once accused her now rested like a friend who understood when to speak and when to simply be. Clara moved slower, but with certainty, as though every motion carried quiet intention. Her mornings began not with the alarm, but with breath. She no longer prayed for strength. She prayed for softness. 3 steady inhales, a hand over her chest, and a reminder whispered into her palm. I am safe here. That was enough. Work shifted too. Her students noticed. You smile more, one said. You seem lighter, another added. They didn't know it wasn't happiness they were seeing. It was presence. The weight she had carried for decades had dissolved into awareness. She no longer performed calmness. She was calm. In the evenings, she lit a candle before her mirror, not for vanity, but for remembrance. She would trace the shape of her own shoulders and whisper the words she had learned from Leela. The body doesn't need to be perfect to deserve peace. Each repetition made the phrase less of a mantra and more of a truth embedded in her muscles. She reconnected with the women from the retreat through quiet messages, exchanged notes about grounding rituals, breath patterns, and the art of saying no without guilt. Her journal entries changed from questions to observations, from "what's wrong with me?" to "this is what safety feels like today." And yet, perhaps the deepest transformation was invisible. For years, intimacy had been a concept built on fear, something she thought she had to earn, prove, or survive. Now intimacy had become a rhythm, something she shared, even in solitude. It wasn't about proximity, it was about presence. Sometimes, lying in bed, she placed her hand on her heart and smiled at how simple it had become, this act that once felt forbidden. The warmth that spread wasn't about arousal or desire, it was about reclamation. Each breath confirmed that her body was no longer a stranger, no longer an instrument of waiting. She didn't rush to date again. When friends asked, she said gently, "I'm learning a different kinds of love first." And she meant it, because love, she had realized, was not a thing to be found. It was a state to be inhabited. Months later, she wrote her final note in her old journal. For years, I thought the goal was to be chosen. Now I know the miracle was to choose myself. She closed the book, extinguished the candle, and let the smoke drift upward. Her room was still, her breath steady, and for the first time, her stillness wasn't empty, it was alive. Time softened around Clara in the months that followed. The urgency that had once driven her, the need to explain, to prove, to justify, faded into something gentler. She realized that healing wasn't a destination, but a rhythm, a constant returning to the body that had waited patiently all along. She no longer measured herself by milestones or what she hadn't experienced. Instead, she found meaning in subtler victories, the ease of breathing through discomfort, the ability to say no without guilt, the quiet pride in not apologizing for her own pace. The woman who once feared being behind had finally stepped out of comparison. She was exactly on time. In her reflections, she began to see her story differently, not as a failure of love, but as a lesson in embodiment. She wrote, "Our culture teaches women to wait for permission, for safety, for love, but the body doesn't wait. It whispers every day, asking only to be heard." Her evenings became a practice of gratitude, not for grand changes, but for ordinary ones. The ease of breathing through discomfort, the ability to say no without guilt, the quiet pride in not apologizing for her own pace. The woman who once feared being behind had finally stepped out of comparison. She was exactly on time. In her reflections, she began to see her story differently, not as a failure of love, but as a lesson in embodiment. She wrote, "The warmth of tea between her palms, the softness of her own breath, the quiet joy of being her own witness." She often returned to the phrase that had guided her. Pleasure isn't performance, it's connection. The teacher in her found new language, even for her students. When they discussed characters in literature who mistook sacrifice for love, she asked, "What if real love is the courage to stay with yourself, even when others walk away?" That question lingered in the air long after class ended. Clara understood now that what had once felt like loss was initiation. She hadn't been rejected. She had been redirected toward the most intimate relationship she would ever have, the one with her own truth. Sometimes, before bed, she would place her hand over her chest and smile at the simplicity of it all. Healing, she thought, was never about becoming someone new. It was about coming home, slowly, fully, finally, to who she had been beneath the silence all along. It took Clara years to understand that her story had never been about absence. It was about awakening. What began as shame had become language, and what once felt like loss had turned into light. Her silence was not a void. It had been a teacher. Now when she tells her story to women in quiet rooms or writes about it in her journal, she does not start with pain. She starts with breath. "Everything I learned," she says softly, "began the moment I stopped apologizing for being slow." There is power in slowness, the kind that heals what speed has broken. When people ask her what changed her life, she doesn't speak about techniques or partners or timing. She says, "One evening, I placed my hand over my own heart and listened. That was the beginning of everything." In that moment, she learned what no one had ever taught her, that intimacy is not an act, but an awareness, that the body's wisdom runs deeper than memory, that safety, not intensity, is the true doorway to pleasure. The next time she saw Daniel's name appear on her social feed, she didn't flinch. She smiled, not out of pride, but peace. She understood now that love is not something another person gives. It's something we uncover when we finally stop treating ourselves like strangers. To anyone listening, her story might sound small, but for those who know what it means to live years disconnected from themselves, her transformation is nothing short of sacred. Because reclaiming your own body is not a single event, it's a lifelong conversation. Each breath says, "I am here." Each touch says, "I am enough." And that's where her story quietly turns outward, toward you. Maybe you too have carried a silence no one sees. Maybe you have waited for someone else to make you feel whole. Maybe your body has been patient, waiting for the day you finally return to it. If so, take a breath right now. Feel where it lands. That's where it begins, not in grand awakenings, not in someone else's arms, but here, in this quiet awareness. Clara would tell you, you don't need to fix your story. You only need to listen to it. Because when you listen long enough, the body always answers back. And if this story spoke to something sleeping inside you, remember, silence is not emptiness. It's a doorway. Step through it gently. Your healing doesn't start when someone chooses you. It starts when you finally choose yourself.